Hello, this is DoNotCiv. Truth is not dangerous. Assumptions and beliefs are dangerous. Every couple of weeks I get called names. Often I'm being compared to Hitler or the Nazis for daring to suggest that overpopulation is in any way, shape, or form a problem. Often, the people who make these comments are not trolling my site. Sometimes they are, but I'd say 80% of the time, they're being earnest. They really believe in what they're saying. I can tell. I just know from the tone of voice, the way that they phrase their comments. I can tell when somebody's trolling me or not. And usually when I go to their homepage and look at the kind of videos that they favor to the comments, often they've never even uploaded a single video to YouTube. Sometimes they have, but most often not. But I can tell just from the kind of videos that they favorite what type of person they are. And usually these people have belief systems that they've grown into, and they're simply, their whole foundational worldview is based on a set of beliefs and belief systems, not truth. Belief is the opposite of truth. Belief singular to truth. You cannot approach and come into contact with truth if you've got a set of underlying assumptions and beliefs. They get in the way. They won't let you get there. Sometimes the people who criticize me are religiously motivated. Oddly enough, I find the people who are religiously motivated to be the more polite, to be, I dare say, even the more sensible in their comments. I often find the most extreme, irrational, usually ridiculous comments comes from the fringes of the left, liberals, and New Age thinkers. Truthers also, I get a lot of truthers, conspiracy nuts, and I guess in that respect, yeah, both those groups, the extreme left and the extreme right, it's somewhat surprising how similar their respective beliefs are, and or at least how much they overlap. And I think what these two groups have in common, the extreme right-wing conspiracy nuts, the truthers, the New World or anti-New World Order people, and the people on the left who are also often truthers, anti-New World Order, Zeitgeist movement, Venus Project people. They're linked together through a set of largely irrational beliefs when it comes to energy. They either have never seen, many of them are mathematically illiterate, they're scientifically illiterate. They have no engineering background at all, at a lay level even. They've never, one of the things that's fun for me is I'll pull out, a science encyclopedia on Sunday morning, pour myself a cup of coffee, and I'll just read through it. And just sometimes I'll encounter new information, and often just, refreshing my memory on topics I already knew about. Few people do that. What a surprise. My grandfather used to do it. He used to just read the encyclopedia for fun. He'd read the dictionary just for pleasure. teaching himself new words. He never had a college education, but he was pretty smart in that respect. Same for my father. My father would do the same thing. Taught himself he was an immigrant to this country, and taught himself to read at the New York Public Library. That's a rational way to approach life, to live life through logic and to live life scientifically I can't think of a more sound way of living your life than that. But to get back to the people who attack me, I find many of them are completely mathematically, scientifically illiterate, often historically uninformed. And again, just like with the troll, you can tell. You can tell based on the type of comments that they leave. They're not aware of anything having to do with the Hubbard curve, oil discovery, the respective links and associations between oil discovery curves and oil production curves. They're not aware of the statistically significant, tightly, positively correlated relationship between human population and oil discovery starting in 1859 at Drakeswell, Pennsylvania. Many of them, they've either never seen that graph or they refuse to acknowledge it. And many of them believe in just completely goofy, daffy things like HARP, H-A-R-P, and the belief that you can geoengineer the planet with electromagnetic radiation from an antenna array. Just the belief that you can actually move continents around with EM radiation. And again, it's because they're just completely scientifically illiterate. No knowledge of anything. But plenty of confidence in their opinions. Willing to call me, or at least throw Nazi cards at me for daring to suggest that human population is directly related to the availability of cheap oil. And now that we've passed the peak, that the human population is going to decline. To call me misanthropic, but for the wrong reasons. That's not why I'm misanthropic. I'm not misanthropic because I see a link between energy input and overpopulation. I'm misanthropic for a completely different set of reasons, which I may go into in this video, or I've gone into in other videos, having more to do with just built-in brain dysfunction of humanity and just basic human irrationality. That's why I'm misanthropic. But to get back to this name calling, so when I look at the pages, and I get a sort of a gestalt of the psychology of the people who attack me. Very often I find that their worldview is grounded in a set of irrational beliefs. Very often they believe in fantasy land, techno-salvational cures for the ills that plague us. Things like 0-point energy, for example. The energy that will power a flying saucer, that all we need to do, that the oil companies secretly have the knowledge about 0-point energy and they're keeping it from us so that they can make lots of money selling us expensive oil. Right? And these people love their conspiracy theories. Boy, they just love their conspiracy theories. They're just so into them. They really are. They really are. See, because the conspiracy theory allows them never to face any truth. They never have to get close to the truth about what we are, what we really are as a species. It gives them a trapdoor, right? They never have to face that uncomfortable truth. They can just blame everything on the New World Order, on the Illuminati, on the Bilderbergers. And they never have to face the truth about humanity, that we're a species that has built-in schizophrenia. Our brains, for at least 80% of the population on Earth, have a schizophrenic, schizotypal malfunction that naturally herds us into belief systems. A stupid person is not necessarily a threat. An idiot is not necessarily a danger. The village idiot who sits atop the wall, hollering out inanities at passers-by, is not a danger. Might be an annoyance, but is not dangerous in and of themselves. But you give that person a set of beliefs. Give that same idiot a belief system, and he becomes very dangerous. And if he begins to grow confident in that belief system, if he gains confidence through his beliefs, he becomes extremely dangerous, one of the most dangerous people on Earth. Because those are the kind of people who form cults. Idiots with confidence are the kind of people who bomb abortion clinics. Confident morons run for office and vote in caucuses and steer political parties. Just look at the frontrunners, the GOP nominees. Thick-headed, stiff-necked, walk around with their chests puffed out with pride. All the confidence in the world that their beliefs are true, that their beliefs have some connection with reality. Newt Gingrich, for example, who called for life in prison for anybody possessing 3 or more ounces of marijuana. Now, I don't smoke pot, but I don't have anything against it. It's certainly not, well, I have some things against it, but it's certainly not as dangerous as alcohol. Right? Far more people die on the roads every year due to drunk drivers. Far more people die of liver cancer and other complications due to alcoholism. You don't see that with pot. But Newt Gingrich thinks the founding fathers would have vigorously, and has said as much, would have vigorously prosecuted people possessing hemp, even though George Washington planted and cultivated hemp. We now know that from his letters and personal diary. I'm not here to advocate hemp. I'm just showing you what kind of lunatic nutbag we have running for president. All right? What's that based on? A belief system. That's all. It's not based on logic. It's not based on rationality. It's a belief system. Right? That's what Mormonism is. It's like Thuman and Theremin and Newman and a couple rocks and read gold plates and, you know. Sorry, computer locked up there. Completely batshit. Crazy belief system. And that's the lead front-running candidate that we have for office. We want to put that person who has that as a substrate in their mind. That's who the Republicans want to put, put up against Obama come in the fall, or at least that's the way it's appearing. How we've made it this far as a species is utterly beyond me. Utterly and completely beyond me. How we've managed to survive this long without blowing ourselves right the fuck off this planet. And total nuclear annihilation is not what worries me. That's not what keeps me up at night, right? I mean, if you're dead, you're dead. It's not a problem. What worries me is not nuclear annihilation. It's that the quality of life on this planet is going to steadily degrade and get lower and lower and lower. And the misery index is going to steadily climb and grow higher and higher and higher for all people on this planet. And the dipshits and morons who throw Nazi cards at me and accuse me of being uninformed and not having the hard facts, like this Trackaton guy did most recently. These people band together and like you ever see a herd of elephants, they form a circle protecting their young ones. Well, in this case, their young ones are their belief systems, and they get very militant. They get very militant about these irrational belief systems, and they're willing to act on them. So they're part of the problem. Oddly enough, this guy doesn't... You look at the videos that he's favored. He's got Michael Rupert in here, favorited. Well, there's a famous scene in the movie Collapse where Michael Rupert shows that graph of... Yeah, you know what? I'll just go get a screen cap of that. I'll throw it up. Here. Here's a screen cap. There's a famous graph from that movie about the correlation between oil production and human population. Duh. He's got a link to it. He doesn't even seem to know the basic tenets, the basic premises of Rupert's own worldview, his viewpoint. This guy seems to think, he said, well, if we just take all the resources and spread it around fairly to all the people on Earth, that'd solve all the problems. Maybe for a few weeks it might. You can't do it. It's logistically impossible. But even if you did, okay, now you have everybody. We've all spiraled down. Those of us with a slightly higher standard of living in the West have spiraled down closer to the living standard of somebody in Bangladesh or Philippines. Yay! Now instead of getting to live in a domicile with an asphalt roof and sheetrock walls and carpet, I get to live in a mud hut. Yay! We're all at the same level. Nice, huh? And we all have the same amount of food. So instead of 3 meals a day or whatever, I don't actually eat that much, but we all get 1 meal a day or 1.25 meals. How long do you suppose that's going to last? How long do you suppose that's going to last? Before the disparities and the inequalities start bubbling up again through the societal strata. Yeah, not long. I mean, here's a thought experiment for you. Say you had this benevolent group of aliens from wherever, Zebel Ganubi And these aliens see that there's a lot of people on Earth, never had any fresh water to drink, don't have enough food to eat. And they come down to Earth and they just drop millions of metric tons of sandwiches and personal data assistants and plasma TVs and couches. They just drop all this shit on Earth so we can enjoy a much higher quality of life, quote unquote higher quality. Everybody's happy and well fed. What's the first thing people do when their bellies are full and they're entertained? What's the very next thing they go and do? Yeah. Start copulating. Start rutting. Is that being a Nazi to say that? To point out one of the most obvious pre-programmed behaviors in human nature? That's being a fascist? What's a Nazi anyway? What are some of the qualities of a Nazi? Hateful, bigoted, violent, and murderous. There's 4. You can form your own list. There's 4 qualities of a Nazi. Is it being hateful, violent, bigoted, and murderous to suggest that we should make some effort to control our behavior, to act responsibly on this planet? Am I being a Nazi by saying that? Who's the Nazi? What's the act of violence? Am I being a Nazi by saying act responsibly with some planetary awareness, with some ecological awareness? Or is the person who's just farting out 8, 9, 10 kids, is that not an act of violence? The mama who farted out 15 kids and has 3 baby daddies, is that not 15 acts of child abuse plus 1 for an act of violence against society? Where's the problem lie here, really? Oh, I forgot. Yeah, every child they're just a gift from God, aren't they? They're all just a gift from God. Yeah, till they grow up and start robbing liquor stores. Bringing a child onto the earth who you got no idea. Don't know how I'm going to care for them. Don't know how I'm going to house them. Don't know how I'm going to feed them. In the case of a mental deformity like Octomon, probably don't even love them. Right? Just plop, another baby, plop, another baby, plop, another baby. Right? Yeah. Probably don't even love them. But these same people who get, and boy do they get worked up, whenever somebody starts talking about, you don't even have to talk about overpopulation, but you can just talk about available resources to feed everyone. Right? You can just talk about oil. And they work themselves into a foaming at the mouth, rabid frenzy. On the left and the right, like I said, a lot of these people, they share the same sets of views. Right? Oh, you can, speaking of stiff-necked and thick-headed, you ever hear this Alex Jones guy? Oh, you can put everyone in the world in the state of Texas and have plenty of room left over. There's no such thing as overpopulation. There's plenty of room on this planet. Right? Guy walks around with his chest all puffed out, so confident in his beliefs. And you know what? It's kind of a tragedy in a way, because that truther community, I don't know if you can, I don't like labels, so I don't want to throw labels at other people. I try to be more fair towards those other people than they are to me. But let me just call it, I don't know, I'll call it the anti-New World Order crowd. Is that fair? Is that okay for me to use that term? It started out, I think, with proper motivations. It started out tearing away a lot of the cherished belief system. The idea that government is always good, that you can always trust your government, that the government never lies to you, right? These were cherished, almost unassailable beliefs throughout much of the 20th century. I mean, if you criticized the government, I mean, you were accused of being a communist or a traitor or an anarchist or worse, seditious. You know, and people were blacklisted by that alcoholic lunatic Senator Joe McCarthy in the 1950s. They had their careers trashed, ruined. They were unable to work. Many of them banned from, the scientists were banned from doing work in universities or banned from any government associated work. Actors in Hollywood were banned. I mean, James Caan, his whole family they were practically wiped out by the scapegoating and blacklisting from the McCarthy hearings. And tens of thousands of people had their lives negatively affected because, and that was just for being vaguely associated with something just to the left of the extreme right, you know. You didn't even have to be a socialist or a communist. You may have just said something once that was remotely favorable to collectivism or socialism, and blam, you were squashed. All right? So there was some ugly shit that went on in the 20th century, and the people who came out and challenged that initially, I'd say, you know, I've been listening to this group of people since the early 1990s. I think is that about right, or maybe? Yeah, I'd say that's about when it started. And initially, yeah, that took a lot of courage. You know, it took a lot of courage to come out and, for example, for people like Seymour Hersh to write about the My Lai massacre at a time when Richard Nixon was in office. He ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize for that. That was risky. That was dangerous. Some of the things that Christopher Hitchens did, going after Henry Kissinger for the genocide in East Timor, that was risky. That was dangerous, and it was admirable to take a courageous stand like that. And it took a lot of tearing away of these cherished belief systems. You know, that you can trust the government, and the government never lies, and so on. But, see, this gets back to the problem with the human brain. Even though, as I said, to get at truth, you have to get rid of beliefs. You have to get rid of assumptions, or you can never come to the truth. And even though they did that, these anti-New World Order, you know, truther people, even though they did that, they stripped away all these beliefs, they then replaced it with a whole new set of irrational beliefs. All right? So instead of being slavishly obedient to government control, instead of being sycophants to state power and being manipulated by this Orwellian system, they came up with a whole new set of beliefs. Beliefs where you never had to come face to face with physical realities, underlying physical realities. It's a round planet. It's a finite planet. There's finite resources, and that means you can support a finite number of species. Not just talking about humans. I'm talking about all the species. Whatever, 50, 60 million that are on this planet, counting all the insects. The Earth can support a finite amount of species, not having to confront that reality, not having to confront human psychology and the limits of human psychology, the limits of the human brain, not having to confront that, not having to confront the inherent embedded schizotypy in the human brain that funnels and herds us into belief systems, Christianity, Islam, or in this case, or New Age belief systems, UFO cults, or in this case, a belief system centered upon all evil in the world resting upon the Illuminati, or the Bilderbergers, or New World Order, not even knowing what that means. Right? Just having that, I mean, that's about as far from being logical and rational as somebody who believes in Newmans and Thumans and reading gold plates in a hat. They're both as equally irrational and illogical, and in the end, probably both equally dangerous. As I said, stupid person in and of themselves is not dangerous. An idiot with a set of beliefs is dangerous, and a group of idiots operating on one collective belief system is extremely dangerous. That's where cults come from. That's where political parties come from. That's where revolutions come from, based on unsound premises and invalid arguments and irrational behavior. Look at the French Revolution. Look at who they supported. They supported murderers and guillotiners. So much blood ran in the street from that first revolution, they had to have a second revolution to get rid of the people who launched the first revolution. Had chopped their heads off. Okay? Same for Russian Revolution. Russia didn't just fall once in the 20th century, it fell twice. The Russian system fell twice. Right? Got rid of the czars and then put in Lenin, which led to Stalin, which led to the most conservative estimates I've seen for the number of people purged. Purged is sort of a polite euphemism for killed, wiped out, exterminated, holocausted. The most conservative number I've been able to find on that is 13 million. Right? Hitler sent 6 to the gas chambers at Auschwitz and Buchenwald. The most conservative numbers I've seen for Stalin is 13 million, and I have seen numbers as high as 50, 60 million and more. But all you ever hear people talk about is when they want to shut down an argument. You hear about Nazis, Hitler's inner circle, the Goebbels, the Mengeles. That's what they throw at you, right? When somebody doesn't like what you're saying and they can't, and they just are so extremely frustrated because you're forcing them to look at reality, what they resort to is pull out the deck of Nazi cards and start chucking them at you. Hitler, Goebbels, Dr. Mengele, eugenics, right? Belligerent, the most highly caustic and belligerent form of ad hom. That's what they resort to. Because you're telling them something painful. You're telling them something that they don't want to hear. Oh, you mean, I thought carrying capacity, that was just for like sheep and cattle ranchers. You mean that applies to humans too? Oh, shit. Well, how are we going to feed 7 billion people then? Yeah, that's right. Oh, well, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. I believe you just got a hidden agenda. There's probably all kinds of oil up in the Arctic that we can go drill, right? We can crush up shale rocks, we can make oil out of that. And there's 0-point energy used to power flying saucers, and we can just use that. There's wind, solar, there's lots of solutions, man. We just redistribute all the wealth around the planet. We could solve hunger overnight. There's plenty of energy, there's plenty of food on this planet to feed everyone several times over. Well, that food is fertilized, it's herbicided, insecticided, tilled, planted, and harvested, all with oil. We've been over this over and over and over and over this ad nauseum. And if you don't get it by now, it means you don't want to get it. You don't want to get it. You want to go off, you want to believe in a fantasy. You want to believe in ridiculous fantasies. You want to create a little raft for yourself, woven together out of all these various beliefs and belief systems. That's your grass raft. You're floating by the hippos in this grass raft, the hippos of reality that are just about to bite your raft in half, and you with it. You've made this fragile little raft out of all these little belief systems, and that's what you want to defend, violently defend. And anybody who tells you otherwise, anybody who says take a logical view of life, which means a vastly reduced set of knowledge that you can reliably act upon, based on logic, to live your life logically and scientifically, to have a scientific worldview, that contradicts your belief system. That overturns your raft. And the most predictable response to that is, of course, anger. I went through this in the previous video. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 Stages of Grief. First response is always denial. Second response, once you realize the problem is real, ain't going away, is always anger. And these people who were, and it's sort of a straddling of anger and the bargaining phase, and these people who've now recognized that there's a serious problem, like this guy who threw the Nazi card at me, they're now caught up in angry responses and silly bargaining with fantastical solutions that have no basis in reality. How do I know this guy's recognized the problem? Because I'm looking at his page right now, and you can see from the videos he's favorited. You can see from his About Me. Country, Antarctica. Companies, saving the planet. Schools, maximum. Right? So he's a silly guy, but you can tell, companies, saving the planet. He wants to save the planet. He clearly, I mean, he's got videos favorited like Michael Rupert, and you can tell he's got some, eco-aware videos in here. He knows there's a problem, right? So he's past the denial phase, clearly past the denial phase. He now knows there's a problem. Funny thing, you look at this guy is just a boiling cauldron of contradictions. He calls me a Nazi, but look at his username. Humans are demons. Humans are demons. I mean, that's his name is Trakaton, but that's the name. You know, you can type in a name for your channel, and you can name your profile. That's his YouTube profile. Humans are demons, which is, I mean, that's basically kind of what the anti-natalists and anti-humanists have been saying. And he accused me of being a misanthrope, an uninformed misanthrope who doesn't have any connection to hard facts. And yet he names his profile, Humans Are Demons. Yeah. Pot to kettle much? Or that's the name of his band. Is a metallic incarnation of psychedelic and experimental analog club grooves. I don't know. I'm not listening to his music. But anyway, that's the name of his band. Still, I mean, you know, it says something about who he is and what he is. And so this is typically what I get. I get people with a fragmented view of reality. They've got bits of rationality, bits of information. And you know, bits of anything is dangerous. Whether it's bits of Zen or bits of understanding about energy, a bitwise approach to anything is dangerous. And that's often what I get. I get people, they've listened to loudmouth, some loudmouth AM radio, talk radio host for a year or two, and they had little bits of understanding, but it just, their worldview just looks like a giant Swiss cheese. You know, holes all over the place. So it's no surprise then these people can't think logically. Many of them can barely think at all. You know, the less, I don't like using words like educated because it sounds elitist, but the less informed you are, the less logical you are, the more quirky, the more irrational your view of the world is going to be, right? Someone who has never studied, say, Maxwell's equations, has no understanding of electromagnetic radiation, can possibly believe that something like a HAARP antenna array can move continents around or change weather patterns. Lack of scientific knowledge, lack of understanding of chemistry and ionic bonds and covalent bonds and physics, and I don't mean at a PhD level, just at a lay level, to understand basic mathematics, basic physics, basic chemistry, basic biology. The less scientifically aware you are, the weirder and quirkier and goofier is going to be your view of the world. And because remember, the human brain is naturally susceptible to irrational beliefs. That's why 80+% of the United States is religious. It's not just some, well, I mean, the United States was settled by Puritans, granted, Puritan colonists, but that's, you know, we've had waves of immigration since then, so you can't just chalk it up to that. It's not just that we were founded on Judeo-Christian beliefs. We're talking about something that's common to humanity all across the globe, right? There's something like 2 million Christians, 1.2 billion Muslims, I'm not sure how many, you know, at least over 1 billion Buddhists, over 1 billion Hindus. So you add that up, you know, add up everybody, and you get 75-80% of the human race is religious. Okay, so we naturally gravitate towards irrational beliefs. It's wired into our brain, right? I mean, it takes real effort to fight against that, to break that programming. It's very tough, especially if that's the household you grew up in. The Jesuits had a saying, you give me a child until they're 7 years old, and I can turn that child into anything you want them to be. They knew they were smart. I don't care that they were Catholic. The Jesuits were very smart. They had a very good understanding of psychology, that it is possible to indoctrinate, especially at a young age. It's possible. That's the key formative stages for the brains and the neurons and the synapses, the wiring of the brain, and that's where you make it happen. So, I mean, look at movies like Jesus Camp, or look at some of these videos on YouTube that show these child preachers. I mean, these children they're broken from an early age. They'll probably never be able to live a normal life, ever, because their brains have been miswired from the time they're 3 years old or so. Their brains have been wired for this particular irrational, basically psychotic, schizophrenic worldview. And you can't fix that. All the therapy, I'm very sorry to say, you cannot fix that. All the therapy in the world won't fix that. Right? Many therapists and psychologists are of that opinion. Once child abuse, you look at all these serial killers, you look at anybody who's dysfunctional in any way, it almost always, I mean, like 90% plus of the time dates back to, or traces back to, child abuse. Adult dysfunction almost invariably traces back to child abuse. So, and that's, how many religious households are there inculcating these values into their children? And even if the child decides to become an atheist later in life, they've been so profoundly dysfunctioned by these early childhood experiences that it's almost impossible to overcome it. Right? And that's just the nature of the way that the brain works. There are formative years. There are formative years where these neuronal connections are established, thought patterns are established, and then it starts to set. Right? It starts to set into the brain. It's very hard to do any kind of reprogramming once these thought patterns have set in. That's what scares the hell out of me about somebody like Mitt Romney becoming president. He keeps, his Mormon values concealed and cloaked and possibly even repressed and deep down. But who knows under what conditions, how and when that's going to pop out again. Right? Maybe there's some 21st century equivalent of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this guy, with his irrational belief system, who's got his finger over the button, has to make key decisions, important decisions, under extreme stress that could affect the fate of everyone on Earth. I don't want somebody who believes in Thumans and Newmans and gold plates and reading gold plates in a hat in that position. Fuck no. The only person in the entire lineup that I would trust would be Ron Paul. Anyone else, fuck it. I gotta vote for Obama. Said I wouldn't. I said I did it before. I said I wouldn't do it again. Well, I voted Paul in the primaries. But, faced with a choice between McCain and that batshit crazy running mate, Palin, Versus Obama? Yeah, sorry, I gotta go with the less stinkier, smaller pile of horseshit there. So back to the whole name calling and who's got the most rational worldview. I mean, I'm open to any type of rational, scientifically based argument for anything, you know. But when somebody just comes out of the starting gate chucking out Nazi cards and Hitler cards, that tells me they don't have an argument. They're frustrated, they're angry, and they know they don't have an argument. All they have is a belief system. And that's what happens when people's belief systems get threatened. They get angry, you know. And these people who've made this screwy, elaborate, labyrinthine belief system out of, I mean, it just looks like their minds, you know what it looks like? It looks like a mental junkyard. Looks like, you remember Road Warrior? Remember those cars cobbled together out of all kinds of fucking crap from the junkyard? And they had big giant tires and, you know, like some of them had 1920s, you know, Duesenberg spliced together with a tractor and big, I mean, they were just like weird conglomerations of vehicles. I mean, that's what these people's minds look like. They look like the creatures from the internal view of their psychology. Just looks like those junkyard cars from Road Warrior. Or I wouldn't even say characters from Star Wars, but because there's probably some rationality in how alien morphology evolves, and there's very little rationality, very little. There's nothing seamless or cohesive or logical or scientific about the overall worldview that these people have, by and large. And I'm talking either on the extreme left or the extreme right. But they're very confident. They're very confident in what they have to say. In fact, the stupider they are, the more confident they are in their beliefs. And a stupid person with confidence is a dangerous person. Right? Smart people, intelligent people, don't walk around the planet confidently. Intelligent people, by nature, are not confident, because an intelligent person has many processes going on in their brain. They're thinking. They've got many processes and meta processes, right? They're thinking. They don't just run out into the street. They look. They warn if they see somebody, hey, mind that bus, what bus splat? They take time not just to protect themselves, but to protect those around them. They're functional, responsible members of society. They're productive. Stupid people, on the other hand, have a lot of confidence. They're very confident. They walk around with their chest puffed out, pointing fingers at other people and telling other people what's what, and the way the world works. They've got maybe one process going on in their mind and blinkers on either side of their eyes, so they can't see what's going on in the world. But they're very confident. All right? They're walking along the train tracks because it's easier to walk along the train tracks, even though they can maybe feel the ground rumbling, maybe even see the light ahead, and you step off the tracks and say, hey, there's a train coming. You better get off the tracks. They look at you, what? Train coming. Trains? I don't believe in trains. Where'd you hear that? Yeah, that's what these tracks are for, that trains come along. These tracks were put here by God for me to walk along. Besides, why would I want to walk down there with you in the loose gravel? It's much easier to walk on the tracks. Yeah, but you're going to die. Ha! You're just an alarmist. Trains. You know, and maybe you'd get disgusted talking to people like that, or maybe you'd say, oh, okay, I'll give it one more chance. You know, it's getting pretty close to the time that train's going to pass through here now. If I were you, I'd really get off those tracks. Oh, shut up. You and your train hysteria. You know, that's the analogy. No, we've never seen, modern humans haven't seen a mass die-off like that in a long time, not since perhaps the bubonic plague. We've done a pretty good job of wiping out our own selves, killed about 200 million in the 20th century just due to war. That's not counting all those who died of disease and other factors. 200 million intentionally, deliberately killed just due to war. But we haven't seen a mass die-off due to unforeseeable consequences in some time. And I say unforeseeable, because I guess by and large the plague was unforeseeable. Even though a lot of people escaped it. You know how a lot of people escaped it? Logic. Rationality. A lot of the Jews escaped the bubonic plague because they had better hygiene. They had quarantine practices for those infected. People understood that getting just fresh air, viruses could not live in fresh air. So they aired out their houses, and a lot of those people survived. Right? People who were able to think rationally had a better chance of surviving than those who thought it was a curse from God and walked down the street bearing a 200-kilogram cross and whipping themselves with cats and nine tails and scarifying and flagellating themselves to make penance, to fight the plague that way. The people who applied logic, rationality, survived in much greater numbers than those other people. So, really there's not a lot of difference across the political spectrum, across the whole socio-political spectrum, across continents, across races. There really isn't a lot of difference in the way that people think. Certain groups of people have a slightly higher IQ. People in Holland have an IQ that on average is about 10% higher than the global average. Jews have an IQ, I think, that's also about 10% higher. And it's noticeable in the way that they behave. You know, the number of educated professionals who are Jewish is much higher than average, especially given their numbers. And it's because they're, by and large, they're smarter. Just the fact. I mean, just go look it up on, just Google it. Google's your friend. But that's not a huge statistical deviation. If you look at the bell curve, 10%. It's not that much of a shift in the mean. So by and large, pretty much all races, all people, all nationalities are equally irrational and susceptible to dangerous, irrational belief systems. And that's why I'm a misanthrope.